Have you ever stopped to ask yourself, right in the middle of a totally mundane Tuesday, perhaps while you're waiting for your coffee to brew or sitting in traffic, what do you actually own? I mean, really, truly possess? If you strip away your bank account, your car, your relationships, your physical possessions, what is the irreducible core of your ownership? This is not just a passing shower thought. This is the foundational ontological inquiry of one of the most fascinating philosophical explorations I have ever encountered. We are diving deep today into a masterpiece of human psychology and philosophy, a book by Zhang Zi Wen called 99 Coen Doi Nui, or 99 Moments of a Human Life. And let me tell you, this work is going to dismantle the way you view your timeline, your insecurities, and your destiny. John starts by looking at the human timeline and making a rather bold, almost unsettling claim: you do not own your past. And you do not own your future. Think about it. The past is merely a memory. It is a ghost. It is a neurological echo of something that no longer exists in physical reality. You can obsess over it, you can mourn it, you can glorify it, but you cannot touch it, and therefore you cannot own it. The future, on the other hand, is an unverified hypothesis. It is a hallucination of probabilities. You can plan for it, you can dread it, but it hasn't happened yet. So, what are we left with? We are left with the now, the present moment. Zhang argues that the only point in the universe where life possesses actual, tangible meaning is in the present moment, or the Coen cock. But here is where it gets incredibly profound. Zhang defines this present moment as a paradoxical boundary. On one hand, the moment is infinitely small. It is like a geometric point with no length, no width, slipping through your fingers the second you try to grasp it. But on the other hand, this infinitely small moment can be expanded infinitely. You can look at an entire human lifetime, or indeed the entire history of the human species, as a single, fleeting moment against the backdrop of cosmic time. Why does this matter? Because if the moment is all you have, then the way you handle the moment is the only thing that dictates your reality. This brings us to the concept of fate. We usually think of fate as this mechanical, predetermined track, like we are trains moving toward an inevitable station. Zhang completely rejects this. To him, fate is not something that happens to you. Fate is the conscious planning and grasping of each individual moment. Fate is a steering wheel, not a train track. By ensuring that the now, this very second, is inherently valuable, you are doing two things simultaneously. First, you are retroactively giving value to your past, because your past led you to this meaningful present. And second, you are proactively constructing a meaningful future. Fate is not written in the stars. It is written in the precise, conscious execution of the present moment. But as soon as we try to grasp this present moment, we run into a massive, invisible web. A significant portion of Zhang's philosophy is dedicated to answering the eternal question: who am I? And to answer this, he synthesizes Eastern and Western thought, from the Upanishads and Lao Tzu to Socrates, Plato, and modern existentialists like Sartre and Heidegger. His conclusion? The human being is, fundamentally and inescapably, a cultural animal. We are born into what he calls the cultural net. Throughout history, countless philosophers and rebels have tried to escape this net. They wanted to return to pure nature, to strip away the expectations of society, the constraints of language, the burden of culture. Think of the ancient Stoics like Zeno and Cleanthes, or the Taoists like Lao Tzu and Zhuang Tzu. They sought to transcend worldly ties. But Zhang points out the brilliant irony here. In their very attempt to escape the cultural net, they simply created new philosophies, new schools of thought, and ultimately became vital links in the exact same cultural net they were trying to break. Zhang uses one of the most evocative metaphors in Eastern literature to explain this, the story of the Monkey King, Sun Wukong. If you know the myth, the Monkey King believes he is supremely powerful. He rebels against heaven, he performs these miraculous somersaults, flying across the universe to the very edge of reality. He finds 5 great pillars at the end of the cosmos, writes his name on them to prove he was there, and flies back to confront the Buddha. But when he returns, the Buddha simply opens his hand. And the Monkey King realizes that the 5 pillars at the edge of the universe were actually just the Buddha's 5 fingers. No matter how far he flew, he had never once left the palm of the Buddha's hand. This is us with culture. You cannot escape society. You cannot escape the net. So, if we are trapped in the net, what does it mean to be free? Is freedom just a myth? Zhang argues that true freedom is not the absence of constraints. That is a teenage fantasy. True freedom, he says, leaning heavily on thinkers like Spinoza, Hegel, and even Mao Zedong, is the recognition of necessity. Freedom is looking at the bars of your cage, understanding exactly why they are there, and learning how to play them like a musical instrument. Spinoza said freedom is the understanding of what is necessary. Hegel pushed it further, saying freedom is the unity of the subject and the object through actual practice. Mao added that freedom is recognizing necessity and then actively transforming the objective world. You don't get free by ignoring the rules of gravity. You get free by understanding gravity so deeply that you can build an airplane. Zhang then takes this abstract ontological philosophy and drags it right down into the mud of our daily, concrete lives. He argues that in the modern world, freedom is actually much more of an economic concept than a political one. Your freedom is tethered to the level of productive forces in your society and your own life. You simply cannot have more freedom than your current economic reality allows. To illustrate this, he points to a massive cultural shift in recent Chinese history known as Xiahai, or going down to the sea. This was a phenomenon in the 1980s and 90s where intellectuals, comfortable in their safe, state-sponsored government jobs, were suddenly faced with the booming private market. Imagine the psychological conflict. You have a safe job, but you feel stifled. You look at the sea of the free market, and you want to jump in. You want to be an entrepreneur. But you are terrified of drowning. So, what do most people do? They hesitate. They stay in their safe jobs, but they live in a state of constant regret and unfreedom. They are physically at their desks, but mentally they are out at sea. Zhang says this hesitation is the ultimate tragedy. Fate, he writes, punishes the hesitant. To grasp your fate means making a definitive, unapologetic choice based on your true feeling of who you really are. Whether you choose to stay in the cultural, academic sphere or dive into the ruthless market, the only wrong choice is the half choice. This brings us to Zhang's concept of the amphibious life. Human existence requires us to live simultaneously in 2 realms. We must live in the realm of suffering, which means accepting the inevitable hardships, the grind, the economic realities of the cultural net. But we must also live in the realm of joy, the pursuit of our deepest desires. Effort and desire, suffering and joy. This duality is not a bug in the human operating system, it is the fundamental essence of being human. We are amphibious creatures, requiring both the dry land of discipline and the deep waters of passion to survive. Now that Zhang has established this massive intellectual framework, the sovereignty of the moment, the inescapable cultural net, and the amphibious nature of our existence, he zooms in. He starts walking us through the actual 99 moments of a human life, moving chronologically through our development. And the very first major crossroads he identifies, moment 1, hits us right in our youth, the awakening of sexuality. This is a high-stakes moment. Suddenly, biology kicks the door down. Zhang frames sexual awakening not as something to be repressed, but as a tremendous, volatile energy source. If this moment is handled with ignorance, or a total lack of restraint, it can completely derail a life before it even begins. He cites heartbreaking, real-world examples. A 16-year-old girl in Xiamen, working as a sex worker, whose life was shattered because she was abused by a relative at 13. stripping her of her fear and her boundaries. He points to chilling statistics of juvenile delinquency. Kids as young as 13 or 14 falling into debauchery or committing horrific gang crimes on buses in Changsha. Why does this happen? Because raw instinct overpowers reason. Zhang's advice here is incredibly grounded. First, normalization. We must accept that sexual urges are a totally normal physiological process for healthy people. There should be no shame, no panic. But, and this is the crucial part, we must practice sublimation. Youth is the golden age. It is a time of peak physical and mental plasticity. The goal is to take that burning, biological energy and channel it into gaining knowledge, building physical fitness, and developing character. He reminds us of human dignity. Humans are, in his words, the essence of the universe. We must use civilization, our reason, our culture, our intellect, to triumph over savagery. Sexuality is beautiful, but it is not the entirety of life, it is merely the opening act. We have to learn to ride the elephant of our instincts, not be trampled by it. And just as we are grappling with our biology, we hit moment 2, the discovery of being ugly. Almost everyone has had this moment. You look in the mirror, perhaps comparing yourself to an actor or a model, and a sinking feeling hits your stomach. You realize you do not fit the aesthetic ideal. You find a flaw. Your nose is too big, you're too short, your skin is wrong. Zhang brilliantly reframes this. He argues that physical appearance is a minor flaw. The only major flaw in a human being is a weak spirit. True beauty is found in inner character, in resilience, in the electric vitality of a positive outlook. Look at history. He points to Aesop, the legendary storyteller, who was notoriously hunchbacked and deformed. He points to Socrates, one of the greatest minds to ever exist, who was universally described by his contemporaries as incredibly unattractive. With bulging eyes and a snub nose. Did their physical ugliness stop them from becoming eternal lights of human wisdom? Absolutely not. In fact, Zhang quotes a young poet who outlines the 4 advantages of having a physical flaw. Think about how profound this is. First, having a flaw provides you with a deeper, heavier experience of life's meaning. You understand suffering early on. Second, it prevents complacency. If you cannot coast on your looks, you are driven, almost forced, to succeed in other areas, to cultivate your mind or your talents to compensate. Third, it fosters a realistic self-critique. It keeps arrogance at bay. And fourth, when a flawed person achieves great success, they earn a much deeper, more profound respect from others. And significantly less toxic envy. Now, Zhang isn't a purist. He acknowledges that if a physical flaw is truly destroying your mental health, modern cosmetic medicine is a perfectly valid, practical tool to boost confidence. But he leans heavily on the philosophy of suffering, citing Schopenhauer and Romain Rolland. Those who have suffered due to their appearance, who have felt the sting of superficial rejection, actually possess the key to understanding the true value of life. Overcoming the pain of being ugly doesn't just make you normal, it elevates you to a superior, more resilient state of joy. You become bulletproof. But what if the insecurity isn't about your face? What if it's about your brain? This brings us to moment 3, the discovery of feeling stupid. Oh, the tragedy of this moment. You fail a math test, or you struggle to articulate a thought, and society, or a teacher, or even your own internal monologue slaps a label on your forehead. Stupid. Zhang argues that labeling oneself as stupid is a profound, tragic scientific misunderstanding. Human intellectual potential is virtually limitless. When you feel stupid, it is almost never a lack of innate capacity. It is usually just a lack of training, or a bad habit of intellectual laziness. Let's look at the data. Zhang points out that the human brain can store anywhere from 10 to the power of 15 to 10 to the power of 21 units of information. To put that in perspective, if a person read books for 8 hours a day, every single day, it would take them 3 million years to reach the brain's storage limit. Your brain can theoretically hold the contents of every single book in all the world's libraries, some 800 million volumes. So, you are not stupid. As the great psychologist William James theorized, most humans live in a half-awake state, utilizing only a tiny, microscopic fraction of their mental and physical energy. Stupidity is not a genetic life sentence, it is a habitual executioner of your talent. How do we defeat this executioner? Zhang provides a gym routine for the brain. He says we must consciously train the 7 powers of the mind. First, numbers. Practice daily calculation. Force your brain to engage with logic. Second, language. Learn new vocabulary and, crucially, use it immediately in your life to shape your reality. Third, memory. Don't just memorize. Use associations, combine abstract concepts with vivid, concrete images. Fourth, imagination. Take notes, observe the world deeply, and allow yourself to daydream with purpose. Fifth, analysis. Practice rapidly classifying information and breaking complex things down to their parts. Sixth, synthesis. Do the opposite, find the hidden connections between totally different fields of knowledge. And seventh, understanding. Cultivate a habit of relentless self-questioning, never settling for the easy answer, always seeking the deepest truth. If you train these 7 powers, the illusion of your own stupidity will evaporate. And when that illusion evaporates, you arrive at moment 4, the moment of feeling good about oneself. This is the birth of true self-confidence. Now, we aren't talking about arrogance or narcissism. We are talking about a healthy, unshakable psychological state of self-worth. Success, Zhang argues, belongs exclusively to those who maintain this high sense of self-worth. He tells the story of a successful friend, a 40-year-old professor who has published millions of words and built a beautiful, happy family. What is this man's defining trait? It isn't his IQ. It is an aura of relentless optimism and self-assurance. When faced with a setback, this professor never says, "I am nothing," or "I am a failure." He simply says, "I haven't succeeded yet." That one word, asterisk yet asterisk, is the ultimate shield against despair. Zhang points to historical figures of immense resilience. Gong Sunhong, a lowly envoy from the small state of Qi, who stood tall and unshaken before the terrifying, world-conquering king of Qin. He points to Napoleon and Bismarck, men whose very existence was defined by an immense, gravitational self-confidence. Why is this feeling of self-worth so critical? Because the heaviest pressure in life doesn't come from the outside, it comes from the inside. If your mind feels good, if your internal foundation is solid rock, then external obstacles, rejections, failures, criticisms, are just spiderwebs. You can walk right through them. Quoting Dr. Orison Swett Martin, Zhang claims there is absolutely no better investment a human being can make than cultivating a positive self-concept. If you do not respect and believe in yourself, it is mathematically impossible to win the respect and trust of the world. Success is not about conquering the world. It is a process of conquering yourself so that the world has no choice but to make room for you. So, you've mastered your biological urges. You've made peace with your physical appearance. You've realized your brain is a supercomputer. You've built an armor of self-confidence. Now what? Now, the cultural net demands that you take your place within it. You have arrived at the moment of choosing a career or a field of study. This is the moment where the self violently collides with society. You are sitting at the dinner table, and everyone has an opinion about what you should do with your life. Zhang's core argument here is profound. While advice from elders and society is valuable for reference, the ultimate final decision must be based on your personal interest and your innate strength. Choosing a path based solely on market utility, doing what pays the most, or what sounds the most prestigious to your neighbors, often leads to a life of hollow mediocrity. It is a tragedy for the individual, and it is a loss for society, which is deprived of your true, passionate genius. For those who don't have a clear passion yet, Zhang advises consulting teachers and parents, but keeping your hand firmly on the steering wheel. You are the decisive judge. But for those who do have a clear, burning interest? His advice is ruthless. Follow your heart and completely ignore dissenting public opinion. He gives us the incredible historical case of Hu Xi, one of the most important intellectuals of the 20th century. When Hu Xi was a young man, his family fortune was in ruins. His brother placed immense, crushing pressure on him to study something useful, like mining or railway engineering, to save the family. Can you imagine that pressure? The weight of your entire family's survival on your teenage shoulders. On the ship to America, Hu Xi tried to compromise. He chose to study agriculture, a middle ground. He spent a year studying it. He got good grades. But he was miserable. He found no joy. And in a moment of sheer bravery, he abandoned that useful path and switched to literature and philosophy. Zhang points out that if Hu Xi had listened to his brother, he might have been a perfectly fine, anonymous agricultural inspector. But by following his heart, he became a titan of modern thought. Hu Xi himself later articulated the philosophy behind this choice. He said there are only two standards for choosing a path: self and society. But here is the trick. Society needs literally every profession. Society needs Nobel laureate physicists, but it also needs passionate shoemakers, brilliant chefs, and dedicated schoolteachers. Because the society standard is so broad, it is actually completely useless as a compass. The only reliable compass is the self, your deep, authentic interest and ability. Look at Galileo. His father desperately pushed him toward medicine because it offered financial stability. Galileo, obsessed with the stars and numbers, chose mathematics and physics instead. Think about the stakes of that choice. If Galileo had been a dutiful, obedient son and become a doctor, the scientific revolution, the very foundation of modern science, might have been delayed by centuries. But Zhang is not a naive idealist. He knows we live in the real world. He acknowledges that sometimes, due to poverty, or limited university quotas, or sheer bad luck, you are stripped of the freedom to choose your ideal path. What then? Do you just give up? He tells the story of Tai Hai Dao, a man who desperately wanted to be a novelist. But he was cripplingly poor. To survive, he was forced to take a paid internship in a biology lab. His dream of writing novels was dead. But instead of drowning in bitterness, he adapted. He applied his immense curiosity to the plants he was studying. He eventually fell deeply in love with botany and became one of the leading authorities in the field. The lesson? If circumstance forces you to abandon your primary interest, do not despair. The human heart is fertile soil. New passions can be cultivated in new fields, as long as you bring your full self to the present moment. And what happens when you bring your full self to the moment, but you still fail? This leads us to the final moments of this section of the book, dealing with academic decline and exam failure. We have all been there. The crushing weight of a bad grade. The red ink on the paper that feels like a permanent indictment of your worth. Zhang completely dismantles this anxiety. He frames academic success and failure not as final judgments of your soul, but simply as the accumulation of life capital. A decline in grades is rarely a sign of stupidity, as we've already established. It is usually just feedback. It is the universe, or the cultural net, giving you data about your methods, your focus, or your current environment. Exam failure is not a wall, it is a pivot point. It is the crucible where your resilience is tested. If you can take a failure, strip the emotion out of it, analyze it using those 7 powers of the mind, and use it to adjust your trajectory, then the failure is actually more valuable than an easy A. Because all of this, the self-mastery over your body, your insecurities, your intellect, your career, your failures. It is all preparing you for the next great horizon of human existence. It is preparing you to step outside of yourself. The summary of this section concludes by hinting at the next massive moment in Zhang's framework, the beginning of romantic love. Think about how perfectly this flows. You cannot truly give yourself to another person, you cannot navigate the breathtaking vulnerability of romantic love. If you are still paralyzed by the fear of your own ugliness, if you still think you are stupid, if you have no self-worth, or if you are trapped in a career you despise because you were too afraid to choose your own fate. Love requires a fully formed, self-mastered individual. And that is the profound genius of Zhang Zi Wen's 99 Moments of a Human Life. It is a roadmap to building that individual, one incredibly deliberate moment at a time. It reminds us that we are amphibious creatures, wading through the suffering of the cultural net, but capable of immense, transcendent joy. You don't own your past. You don't own your future. But you own right now. You own this exact second. The question is, what are you going to do with it? Thank you for exploring the deep now with me. Until next time, own your moments.